Hi there, friends. Welcome back to As a Man Thinketh on Yanasa TV. I'd like to take a moment and just reflect for a second here on P'Nut the Squirrel. For those of you who don't know P'Nut the Squirrel was a rescue squirrel, and he and his orphaned pal, Freddie the raccoon, were abruptly taken by the state of New York and euthanized. The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation staged a 5-hour raid on the home of Mark Luongo. I think I said his name right, Mark Luongo. Mark Luongo had started a nonprofit that rescued animals called Peanuts Farm. Sorry, that's Peanuts Freedom Farm, named after the squirrel, P'Nut. P'Nut was a bit of a celebrity on social media as well. Now, Mark has started a GoFundMe fundraiser to fight the state of New York and hold them accountable for what happened to P'Nut. And according to that fundraiser, he says, to add to our anguish, they informed the media of their decision before even notifying Peanut's Freedom Farm his loving home. There were some reports that said that this was an unwarranted search, but I actually don't think that that information is correct. I believe the state of New York had a warrant, but they received that warrant off of an anonymous tip. Now, I'm going somewhere with this, so bear with me for a second. P'Nut, in my mind, represents a lot more than just a squirrel that was taken into custody by the state of New York and killed. P'Nut represents something that we've seen across this country that is a major growing problem, and I want you to think about this as you head to the polls. According to the Pacific Legal Foundation, the raid on P'Nut's home has exposed the public to a government practice that has been festering unnoticed for too long. It hasn't been unnoticed on this channel, though. Increasingly, federal, state, and local authorities have been intruding on private property and employing unnecessary and exceptional force to regulate increasingly trivial aspects of American lives. The way the government does this is pretty straightforward. It says, first, it makes it illegal to do something in the commonplace without a license, which means agents can obtain a warrant for your property over the crime of being unlicensed. And that's what he was raided for. He had a warrant for being unlicensed to care for wildlife. Although he was an established 501c3 that was taking care of animals that had been harmed. You still have to have a license. That's what happened in P'Nut's case. The New York Department of Environmental Conservation raided the home on a warrant after receiving tips about the illegal keeping of wildlife as pets. You know, my dad had a pet raccoon in college. He was in Illinois. No, I'm not trying to get you arrested, Dad. I'm just saying. It was a rescue. My mom and him had an animal rescue on the college campus, and he had rescued a raccoon. But when government does issue a license, it attracts strings. Sometimes those strings are large fees or time-consuming educational requirements, but increasingly, those strings include the power to enter homes, businesses, and other private properties at will and without a warrant or probable cause. Now, I'm going to talk about this in just a second because there is no constitutional authority actually given to agencies to create crimes that are therefore punishable. The only ones in the United States who can create a law to put a U.S. citizen in jail or to punish them is the United States Congress. But these agencies have more laws, more criminal laws on the books than Congress has ever enacted. In other words, while P'Nut's owners were raided because they didn't have the right government license, many other Americans must tolerate home invasions because they did get the right license. Such intrusions have become all too commonplace in the land of the free. And you've seen this. So what they're talking about there is if you get a license, like in Montana, in Billings, for example, people who had a license to do massage therapy had to subject themselves to warrantless searches to make sure that they weren't actually doing rings of prostitution. It was to protect the public, to prosecute prostitution. Therefore, if you have a massage license in Billings, Montana, we have the right to search you. And, you know, this right to search to protect the public happens all over the place. There was a county in the United States where a judge signed off on the ability for the state to go in without a warrant and search, I don't know, it was a 500-mile radius area, thousands of homes, to check for fruit flies. I mean, they had the right to come onto your property to check for fruit flies and other pests. It's ridiculous. That is just basically opening the door for them to come onto your property for any reason whatsoever. And this is something that we've talked about on this channel several times over the past year. Remember the private farm co-op in the state of Michigan that was raided for raw milk? These girls weren't doing anything wrong. They had a private farm co-op, which means that the people who were buying the food that went into the co-op were private owners of the co-op. And then the state of Michigan went in, took all their milk, fined them. Same thing happened in the state of Pennsylvania. Many of you are familiar with the case of Amos Miller. Amos Miller has a private co-op that runs across the entire nation. A lot of farmers are members of that co-op, and a lot of consumers are members of that co-op. And they raided the co-op over raw milk because informed consumers do not have the right to choose where their food comes from. That's a big no-no. There's an interesting case on the Institute for Justice's website, and I know some of you are thinking, well, that law firm is representing the fake meat companies. But here's the thing is, you know, if I have the right to meat and I want the right to eat meat and retain that right for myself, then I shouldn't be taking away the right from somebody else who wants to eat something that was grown in a lab. That is completely their choice. They can do whatever they want to. The issue I have with that isn't that there are fake meat companies out there, isn't that they're trying to grow this weird stuff in labs and feed it to people. It's that they're trying to force me to eat it. But I'm not going to force somebody who wants to eat it to not eat it. I mean, that's ridiculous. So I don't have a problem with the Institute for Justice representing those people. But the Institute for Justice has this case of a couple in California that owns a vineyard. Michael and Kelly Ballard. And if you listen to Michael Ballard talk, he is very pro-American rights, which could be a cause for this prosecution in the state of California. They're in Santa Clara County, one of the most expensive counties to live in the United States, okay? They have this small vineyard. It's a modest vineyard for that part of California. I mean, most of it, I probably wouldn't find it that modest myself, but, you know, for that area of the world, it's a modest vineyard. And they have an employee who's worked for them for 20 years.
Marcelino has been our vineyard manager here and taking care of the grounds for well over 20 years now. The Martinez family is like family to us, and when you go through those kinds of human experiences with someone, you know, there's a bond that gets created, and there's just no way in the world we were going to throw these people out on the street.
When Marcelino Martinez and his family needed a place to live, Michael offered them the opportunity to live in an RV at his winery.
Now, what ended up happening was they had an unfounded complaint that they were dumping sewage into a stream that bordered one side of their property. And so what happened is Santa Clara County officials came out to inspect to see if they were in fact dumping sewage in the stream. In my perspective, if they were dumping sewage in the stream, they should have been able to take samples from the stream downstream to see if there was actually anything going into it, because they found that nothing was actually going on. There was no legitimacy to the complaint. But it gave them a legitimate search warrant to go onto the property and investigate. And like I said, I think that they should have had more evidence than a complaint before they went into this person's property and investigated. I think in the state of New York, they should have had more evidence than some anonymous complaints against these people who had this farm. So anyway, County officials have this anonymous complaint. They go into the vineyard and they find out that their farm worker is being housed on their property with his entire family, which is his wife and a couple kids, in a camper that is complete with power, complete with water, complete with sewer. Livable conditions, probably better livable conditions than most people in Santa Clara County, California. That has a very high homeless rate. It's not illegal to be homeless there, by the way.
We first started dealing with the county in 2017 when the inspector came and first informed us that we'd have to remove the trailer from the property. They said the reason that they were enforcing this was because we were creating a public nuisance, and somehow the Martinez family living in a trailer on the back of 60 acres where no one can see them and they don't come in contact with anyone else, that could be interpreted as a public nuisance made little sense to us at all.
So you can't live on somebody's private farm in a camper, but you can live on the streets in Santa Clara, California. So if you're looking to be homeless, you can head that way. Santa Clara, California is one of the most expensive places to live. A lot of people cannot afford to live in the county. They'd have to commute from far away.
Santa Clara County, California is one of the most expensive housing areas in America. Saratoga is particularly expensive, with median rent costing over $3,500 a month and 98% of homes costing more than $300,000. The high cost of housing has left many middle to low income families with no place to live and contributed to California's severe homelessness problem. California is experiencing a housing supply crisis. They increase poverty, homelessness, and drive hardworking families like the Martinezes away from good schools and services.
And so they proceeded to fine this vineyard over $120,000 while putting up a lot of bureaucratic hurdles for them to jump over to build a permanent residence on their property for this employee. This employee was very important to them. He had worked for them for about 20 years, several decades. He was like family to them.
The Ballards are just trying to do the right thing and keep the Martinez family from homelessness. But they still faced being fined every single day for several years for letting the Martinez family stay.
Well, that was what was so shocking about this, is that when they started to impose fines, it was like they were such bullies. They came in here and said they were going to charge us $1,000 a day until we kicked the Martinez family off the property.
After years of standing up to the county, the Ballards and the Martinezes are building a traditional house on the winery for the Martinez family to live in. But the government has not made the process easy due to costly construction permits and accruing RV fines.
You know, getting permits and getting all that work done and doing all of the studies that have to be done to qualify the permits is very expensive, very time consuming. And the whole time that we're pursuing that, it's daily fines are building up.
Santa Clara County should not fine people for doing something that is not only harmless, but actually helps people. It certainly should not fine them such an extreme amount, an amount so high that it violates the Constitution's prohibition on excessive fines. What the county is doing is both bad policy and unconstitutional.
And it didn't matter. There were natural disasters. They had a mudslide that came in and completely covered their drive. And although the mudslide came off of another private property across their private property and onto the road, the county came by and cleared the road, but didn't do anything to help them get out. So for months they were stuck, behind this mudslide and getting fined by the county every single day that their employee was still living in that camper, because obviously during that time you can't move forward with construction plans. But the county made it extremely difficult for them to be able to build this new residence for their employee, even though they were trying to do the right thing. And it took a long period of time between COVID and then the mudslides and some of the other events that occurred for them to be able to get this house up, and it equated to over $120,000. This type of activity from government agencies, whether they're state, county, or federal, is absolutely ridiculous. We have entered into a period of time where they have more power than the people do. They really do, because the President of the United States has to go through hoops in order to fire some of the heads of these agencies when he should be the executive director of those agencies. He should have ultimate control. We're the ones who are supposed to vote for him. And according to our vote, who we put in office, they should be able to manage those agencies. But that's not the way it's been. It's not the way it's been at all. And over the past several years, what we've actually seen is these agencies strengthen through more executive orders. They give them more and more strength. They have more power than Congress does. And it doesn't matter how overburdensome they are. This is a bureaucracy that is thirsty on power. So when I heard of the story of P'Nut the Squirrel and what had happened there, that's where my mind went. It started looking back over the past year. I did a video on here where a teenage girl was forced to shut down her apiary. They told her to cease and desist operating the apiaries, which means she couldn't get in there to care for her bees, because she was using gravel underneath her apiary, which is a common practice to keep things clean and neat. She was putting gravel in an impervious surface in their minds, and therefore she had to cease and desist because she didn't have a permit to build out an apiary. That was in Wake Forest, North Carolina. We have a federal agency under the USDA that wants to send a ranch couple to jail. They want to arrest two parents and send them to jail because they got permission from another sub-agency from the USDA to change their watering system to conserve on water. Let's think about these things for a minute, people. Where is this country going at the moment? At what point does a police state become too powerful? The next time somebody comes up to me and says something about social justice, environmental justice, I'm going to ask them about justice for P'Nut the Squirrel. I think P'Nut the Squirrel should be like the new emblem on a flag somewhere, because he died because of the biggest problem that we face as Americans today. You know, what's bothersome about this is America was founded by men and women who were tired of having redcoats coming in and raiding their homes without a warrant, who were tired of being taxed without having any representation, who were tired of being bossed around by these colonels and sheriffs and people who were employed by the king. And what have we traded it for? It's like the American experiment has slowly reverted back. I don't know. I think it's something to think about. I think it's something to think about as we head into the elections, as we think about the future, where we want America to go. Is this truly the direction we want it to go? Do we want our lives controlled and licensed and owned by agencies? Or do we want to take control back ourselves? And what does that look like? How do we do that? There are a lot of people who think America's too far gone. I don't think it is. What I think it is that we need to wake up. We need to wake up and we need to see what's going on, and we need to put the power back into the people.